So what I'm looking at here then is effectively a workflow. And this is very good because what it does is it enables us to understand exactly how all the various different stages in the risk management and analysis are actually linked together. And so for all of those in the organization that are involved in this process, they can see exactly what the starting point is and the various different subsequent steps after that. And this is just an example of what your risk management process might look like. And we're going to take a look at some of the areas here today. Obviously, we've only got a short amount of time, but this should give you an idea in terms of the various different capabilities that we have around risk management, and also, again, touching on the point mentioned earlier about how we can integrate this into, for example, our actuals reporting and our planning and forecasting processes as well. So first thing I'm going to take a look at is around the risk side. So the first area up here, we're looking at identifying our various different risks in the organization. So now what we're assuming is we've identified maybe a new risk. So what we're going to do is actually create a new risk within Prevero. Now here we're going through a process where we actually create it, but of course this information could be imported from external sources as well. So you don't have to necessarily maintain all data manually in Prevero, so we can import that in from another system outside. So what we're going to do now is actually just create this risk manually. So for example, what I can now do is give the risk a title. So maybe it's I don't know, lack of particular engineers, for example, from a water maintenance perspective. And what this then does is actually also kind of, as it says there, it's giving it the name of the risk, and we'll see that this is a way in which we can actually track the particular risk as we go through the process. We then actually decide what kind of risk topic we're going to assign to this particular risk. And the risk topics we have, well, that's entirely up to you. So what we've got here is various different areas within the organization, or other topics, and they can vary from different parts of the organization to the next. So here we have a particular company called VGW, and they've got their various different risk topics. And under Prevero Energy, for example, we've got these particular topics. So in this case, what we're looking at is engineers from the water maintenance side. So let's actually select wastewater management. Now when I select the particular risk topic, the actual risk coordinator defaults in. So this is actually linked into the particular risk topic. So we have various different owners for the different types of topics in the organization. So for example, if I were to maybe switch that to wastewater projects, you can see that the risk coordinator actually changes. So what we're doing here is actually building some logic into the process, trying to reduce the number of keystrokes in terms of actually maintaining and managing these risks, so as the risk creator here, I don't actually have to select the risk coordinator. That's been predetermined for me. So we know that when we create this risk, it's actually going to be assigned to the correct coordinator. Then we've got the risk area that we can select, and again, this is just a bunch of examples in terms of what you can use here. So we've got, for example, external risks. Particularly in this example, if we're looking at maybe the utility side, there's going to be lots of regulatory risks and political and legal areas that are going to impact us as well as we can select strategic risks and so on. Now in this particular case, what we're looking at is personnel risks. So we're looking at staff here as a key risk area. And then what I'm now going to do is assign it to a particular organization. Now, there's all security behind the scenes here, so in terms of what I can allocate to in terms of the organization unit, that's just down to my security rights. I'm logged in as an administrator in this particular example, so I can select any organization, but if I was another user in Prevero, I may only be able to see and select certain elements of this organization structure. So this, of course, this would be your organization structure here, so let's actually select our sewage company there. And now I've selected the key components of this particular risk. I'm just going to now create it. And in the process of creation, it's now going to take me to my risk processing view here, so we can add a few more bits of information. So here you can see the reporting period, so that's defaulted into our current reporting period here. You can see then that the risk number that's been assigned, so it's actually a combination of a number which has been sequentially assigned plus that description that I put in a moment ago. So when I mentioned this is how we can actually track the risk through the various different processes, so there we can see that description there, and of course the risk topic, the risk area and so on, that's actually been defaulted in from the previous screen. We're currently looking at an active risk, but what we can do is make these inactive, and once we make them inactive, for example, they will fall out of the entire monitoring process. So we can have various different statuses for these risks. What I can also do at this particular point in time is actually change the risk officer if I so wish, because again I've got the ability to do that, but of course that could be actually controlled from a security access perspective. So we're now going to put in a description, so it actually helps the next reviewer to understand exactly why we're actually logging this particular request. So it could be, I don't know, there's a particular engineer shortage in the market. So maybe you know there's only a finite number of particular types of engineers, for example, from a water treatment perspective that are available in the marketplace, and that's a potential risk that's you know, with our particular kind of loss rate of employees, we may find it very difficult to secure those particular engineers, which can then have obviously a much larger operational impact. But you know, it's whatever description that you see fit. We're then going to determine how we're actually going to assess this particular risk. So is it quantitative or is it qualitative? And depending on which we select, we'll have different input options. So I'm going to select quantitative for the moment. Now what we can also do here is actually add some various different attachments, for example, to provide some backup to this particular risk. So for example, if I just right click here and go to document and insert document, what I've got in this particular case is a risk document which is in a Word format, and what we could say is this has come from, I don't know, market analysis or something, or maybe recruiters in the industry that are telling us there's a potential problem there in the pipeline, but it's providing some context to the particular risk. Then we need to start talking about things such as gross value of the risk. So how much, you know, what is the impact from a cost perspective that we expect this to potentially have? So for example, this could be maybe you know, £1 million in this particular case. Then we look at the probability, and here I've got when I hover over the title there, so very much similar to Excel, I've got an example there about how I might want to categorize this particular risk, and then based on that particular assumption, what I'm going to do here is say maybe it's very likely. Now when I put very likely in, you can see the net risk is actually calculated automatically. So it's 1 million, because we're saying it's pretty much going to be sure that's going to happen. But if I were, for example, to say probable, you can see there the actual value changes. So what we can do here is actually build in some logic that determines, depending on what we actually select as a possibility, our net risk is actually calculated. If I wanted to, I could actually spread this cost over more than just one particular period. So it's just telling me there I need to input into the various different years, and that could go far ahead of 2022, so that's entirely up to you. So we can actually spread this risk over various different timelines. How did I actually calculate this? Well, I'm just going to put guessed for the moment, but of course it would be a relevant description as to why or how actually we got to that particular number. How are we actually going to evaluate this particular risk? So there's various different options. Again, this is just an example. You would have those that would be specific to your particular process, but I know I could maybe put it against operational results. Are we going to actually include measures in a particular process to actually look at this risk? So if I say yes, I can now go into my measures and actually start logging those. So I can put in, for example, a description, so whatever, again, you know, I particularly want. What is the start date for this particular measure? So maybe we're going to start looking at this at the beginning of May. What is the particular category? So is this going to be unlimited as a measure? So we're going to have to constantly do it. Is it going to be temporary? Is it based on as and when it's needed? So I'm going to select that as unlimited. Again, we can assign particular owners of this particular measure. So again, the ownership is particularly important. It's currently planned, so that again will impact how we actually report on this. From a coping perspective, how are we actually going to do that? So are we going to be looking at active or is it going to be more passive? So here what we're going to do is actually try and reduce the actual risk. And how much do we think we're going to limit the risk by? So let's put maybe 150,000. And also, how probable is it this particular measure will work? Well, let's say very likely. We can also actually put in the cost of operation here. So for example, if we maybe need to retrain a particular users, make other skills transferable within our workforce, there may be a training cost involved. Maybe we have to actually go to more specialist recruitment consultants, for example, in this case, and that could be a particular cost associated with that. So I can put in maybe 10,000 for the various different years that we've got here. So now I've added that, if we just go back to risk validation, and let's just calculate this particular change. So what we can now see then is actually we've got a net difference there in our risk based on the various different criteria that we entered earlier on. And again, I could add various different measures in there, and they could all affect the various different net risk number that we get here. We can also bring in warning indicators, because again, when we're actually monitoring this, we may want to be alerted to when we're getting to a point where things are getting particularly serious. So again, I can put a description in here for this particular indicator. What type of area is it looking at? So maybe we're looking at the business area in this particular case. And also what we can do here is this is when we can start bringing in things such as our actuals data. So again, going back to that point in terms of integrating our risk process or management process into things like our actuals into our planning and forecasting process. So what I'm going to do here then is actually select a particular department or area of the business. So let's actually go down here and select our particular sewage entity. What period am I going to be looking at here? So let's bring in our 2016 actuals. And what account are we going to look at? So there's a particular account, I think it begins with 5. So actually here we are with our personnel costs. So let's actually just look at personnel expenses. And then what you can see is it's bringing in our actuals data. So this is actually what we're going to monitor against. Then I can put in my thresholds, so I can say actually if it's greater than, let's say, 450,000, it's actually a red alert. If it's above maybe 400,000, so between 400,000 and 450, it's a yellow alert. And what this does is when these numbers are breached, so we know actually already we've breached those numbers in this particular case, various different alerts can be sent. So maybe when it's yellow, maybe a few people get alerted to say that we're actually at the point where we're kind of getting close to the maximum limit here. And when it gets to 450 or plus, then maybe more people are alerted. So we can build this into the whole alerting feature in Prevero. So I just calculate that. You can see actually we're already above the threshold, but that's just to show you an illustration there. Who is actually going to be responsible in effect for looking at this particular indicator, and also how often are we going to review this? So there's an example then in terms of how we can actually manage the risk. So we can actually bring in some various different measures. We can also bring in the use of indicators as well. So let's just save those changes. And once I've done that, what I can now do is actually push this up to the next level for review. So am I sure I want to actually report this risk? Yes, I am. So that now goes off to someone else. The next person up, they get an email, for example, to say that I've actually submitted this. And then what they could do is come into this particular screen here, and then when they've actually reviewed, they can then also then approve this particular risk. So of course it's not all about just monitoring risk. What we want to do is actually be proactive as well. So what we can do is create various different opportunities. So exactly ways in which we can be proactive in terms of neutralizing maybe any particular types of risk. So what I can do here is say actually maybe we go to, I don't know, add new recruiter in the process. I can actually then again decide which area this is going to be specifically linked to. So again, we've got that same list that we saw earlier on. What is the organization unit that we're going to be looking at here? So I'm going to assign this particular opportunity to our water waste area, and also who is going to be the risk officer. So once I put in again some basic information, I can then put in more detailed information in around this particular opportunity. So for example, exactly what is it we're going to do from a proactive perspective, what is going to be the base value of this in thousands, the evaluation methodology. Do I actually want to assign it to a particular risk? So these are all the various different risks that we've got in Prevero that we're currently monitoring, and so on. So this again just provides an example here about how we can be proactive in terms of actually being able to deal with those potential risks that may come up in the future. So we've logged our risk. We've also got the opportunities here that we can put in as well from a proactive perspective. And also we've got the measure management side of it as well. So if we just take a quick look at that in the interest of time. So we saw this screen before, but this is where we can jump straight to looking at our measure management and reviewing these and actually making any various different changes and tweaks that we need to. So of course then at some point we want to monitor this from a reporting perspective. So down here under reports in this section here we've got our, for example, risk officer overview. So this is where we can view all of our various different risks by different organization entities, by risk officer, for example. We can see here all the various different risks, and I can jump these risks just by clicking on this particular option here. And if we go down to the bottom, we can see our lack of engineers from the water maintenance side. We can see our net risk, etc., and probability and the risk class. It's a nice kind of easy dashboard for us to review and see exactly what's going on here from a risk perspective. We've also got a dashboard of risk areas as well. So here what we're looking at are the various different risk areas, so external, strategic and so on. We can see the gross risk, we can see the net risk before any action. So remember, this is where we're taking into account the probability of the risk occurring, and then the net risk all is where we've actually, for example, put in some measures which will hopefully reduce our risk further. So we can see some analysis there. We can see the risk limitation by measures, so we can see exactly how much we're reducing the risk by, for example, by putting in measures. But of course, certain measures can only be reduced by certain amounts. So things like the external risk, we have very little control over those, so the impact of measures would be relatively small compared to, for example, personnel risks, which is where we can have a bit more control. Got a nice chart here showing us the information in a graphical way. So it's very nice here to see that information displayed in that particular format, because it helps us understand a lot clearer in terms of what's going on between the gross net risk before action and net risk after action. And then we have here our top risks, in this case by according to gross risk, but what I could do is actually show me them by net risk and so on, and it dynamically updates this particular table. And once again, what we can do here is drill down into the detail. So if I want to look at all my external risks, I can just click on this option here, and I see my total external risk here broken down into the various different subcomponents. And again, I can drill down further to then view the various different risks in that particular segment market risk. So there's a lot of ability here to do the kind of self-service analysis. I can see all my risk, I can drill down, I can understand exactly what's going on. And then just to finish off, again in the interest of time, we've got things like risk maps. So again, this is a nice way to show our risks in a way that we can easily understand. For example, the kind of key risks that we should be looking at. So here we can see all the risk numbers in the various different areas there. And what I can do is actually just switch to show me the number of risks. So if I just want a summarized view, I can see that as well. And here I've got my list of all my various different risks as well, and we can drill down into this to view the risks and drill into the detail if we want to. Also, the ability to perform Monte Carlo simulations. So for example, where we want to bring in all the various different risks and run different scenarios or simulations, we can decide what risks we want to bring into this simulation. And we can actually perform these various different calculations. So if you want to do some kind of, if you like, hardcore risk analysis, we've also got the ability to do this type of simulation. So just looking at the time, we're almost at 12:30, so I'm going to hand back to Corinne to see if there's any questions that we have.
Thanks, Andrew. Okay, so yeah, we do have some questions. So the first question is, this looks like a very comprehensive model, but the person is asking, is there lots of effort to get something like this up and running?
No, because essentially what we have is we have content already available for you to use. So in effect, you can take that predefined content and you can pretty much start running from that if you so wish. Of course, you can tweak it to meet your particular needs. So no, it can be up and running very quickly.
Okay, thank you. The next question from the audience, is there any coding?
No. So no coding whatsoever in Prevero. So you don't need to be technical. Our solution is very much designed to be owned by the business. So therefore that means no coding at all. And it's actually a question we get asked quite a lot actually on these webinars as well. So in terms of my background, I'm an accountant. I'm not technical. I don't know coding or anything like that, but I don't need to in order to use Prevero.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about integration. So the question is, how integrated is the Prevero risk management solution to the actual planning module?
So very. So effectively, our solutions are all fully integrated. So it means that, for example, in one of the cases when I was putting in the indicators, and I was selecting the actuals number that I was going to monitor that against, that could easily have been, for example, planning and forecasting data. And also what you can do then is when you are, for example, costing the various different measures, I think I'll put in 10,000 for each year, I think it was in one of the examples, that can flow straight into your actual forecast. So it is very much integrated, and it's very much about bringing the risk management into the, into the planning and the forecasting arena as well.
Okay, thank you. Next question, do you have ISO compliancy?
Yes, so our solution is ISO 31000 compliant. So again, going back I think to one of the first questions there, it means you can get up and running very quickly. Predefined content is fully compliant with ISO.
Thank you. Okay, and I have another question. Is this only suitable for large organisations?
No, so it can be used very much for small, medium and large-sized organisations. So we're not just effectively looking at this from a large organisation perspective, because actually small companies, small and medium-sized organisations can also have very complex requirements around risk management. So very much designed for any size of organisation.
Okay, thank you. That was the final question. So I'll draw the webinar to a close, and I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and have a great day. Thanks very much indeed.